So I loved today's word, inspiration, spirit, and I loved looking at your vision and mission statement. Not that I've not heard them before, I've heard them obviously, but talking about how we're going to joyfully celebrate. And then your mission talking about transformation. So I've talked a lot about those things this year, and they are dear to my heart. And even the word confidence, that was used a lot in the reading for today. Confidence, which actually comes from the words kon fe, which means with faith. So it's something we don't think about that often, but it gives it a new and kind of deeper meaning. But today I wanted to talk about these words as a kind of celebration of life. And I'll tell you a little bit about how I came upon them. This past year I've shared with you a lot about my own journey through softening and the softening that allowed for release, and how that release is now going to allow me to move into expansion. So for all of us, this is true, right? We soften and we allow ourselves to release all the stuff that's not needed, and even just our voices into the world that we talked about last time I was here, and how that then can allow us to expand into the universe. So life is about these constant transformations. I was telling Bob, you've transformed, you can speak now in front of people, and he did a fabulous job about how we're constantly rebirthing, and I shared with you earlier some of my own kind of rebirthing experiences, and how life is this constant cycle of being born, living, transforming, perhaps releasing and dying out, and a new thing being born. So we're always working towards, perhaps a new goal or some new way we'd like to be. And sometimes we get caught up thinking that it's about getting whatever that is. But really it's about the journey that takes us there. And just this past week, I've really been examining not just my life, but also my business and what I want to do with it and where that might take me, and kind of searching for different words that would express what I'm about, and how I could use that to kind of do the next step as I expand my business into the world. And I came up with these words after working with this woman named Christine Kane. Have any of you ever heard of Christine Kane? She actually was a singer-songwriter. That's how I knew her first. And I went to a retreat with her. I think it was her very first one that she started doing this other work. In her music, this idea of, living big and dreaming big started coming through in her music. And then she started doing these retreats, and I don't remember what the first one was called. But she's like a millionaire now. She started doing, these talks and working with people, working with corporations and things like that, trying to help them just expand into their biggest vision. And she has a very different kind of, even though she's working with a lot of kind of traditional business people, she has a very different approach. And she says there's basically two tracks. There's the strategy track, which has a lot been written about, what strategies to implement in or tactics, for your business. And then she said there's the soul track. And from her perspective, most of the reason that we don't really reach whatever we're trying to attain is because of problems in this soul track, places where we lose our energy or not believing in ourselves enough to make decisions, etc. It's really amazing work. So she had a free kind of, webinar video, a few videos and a webinar thing that I did. And I understood it all. It wasn't any new information for me. But still, it was really compelling, and taking a bunch of notes, and she was saying how, these things would really work and that they've been proven to work, et cetera, and I was like, well, okay, but I couldn't really see how. But after listening to her, within 24 hours, I started to have a whole different idea of what my business might be and what that expansion was going to be. I've known it's coming, I just haven't really quite known what form it's going to be in. And she was talking about how that is the deal. It's not about the getting. It's not about getting whatever it is that is at the end of your goal. It's about becoming whatever it is that you need to be in order to be in that other place. That will take you there, that becoming. And so really about the journey. So these words kind of came out of that whole kind of 24-hour period. And I thought how beautifully they put everything that I believe in just 3 very simple words: breathe, live, love. And I started thinking about my own work, and how I'm very involved in yoga, and that's kind of this breathing aspect and the physical aspect. And my own journey through cancer and, really appreciating life even more, having gone through something that was really, really acute and serious, and how that is kind of the word live, really embrace life and live. And then love, how once you do that, you're just in love with everything, with all people and with life, and as a musician and creative artist, how that is expressed as love as it comes out of me. And even this last talk that I gave about your voice and how really, sending your voice out into the world, whatever that is a way of expressing love to the world. And I started thinking about breath and how the breath embodies all of these things. So as you breathe in, it's that taking in of all of the beauty of life and the energy and that we need literally, physically to live. And how living is those spaces between. So I was talking about the becoming before, but it's, the spaces between the breath. You can think of life in that way. Those spaces in between is where living really happens. We think it's those big highs or the lows, but actually a lot of times it's just the little things in between. And then the exhalation is that love, when we send our energy out into the world. So I wanted to just kind of celebrate life with you, thinking about these 3 words today. Norman Vincent Peale says, when you affirm big, believe big, and pray big, big things happen. So I have a beautiful book that I've shared with you before called Meditations from the Mat, and it's focused on yoga, but I'm going to share this with you because I feel like this is also about life. He says, we are not practicing to take the edge off. The asana, the physical yoga practices, are not an ancient and time-tested alternative to Valium. We are practicing asana to realize our divinity, enact it in this lifetime, and share it with all beings. So I think the same is life. This is the same for life. We could substitute the word life in here. We are not practicing to take the edge off, or whatever your practice is. Life is not an ancient and time-tested alternative to Valium. We are practicing life, living life, to realize our divinity, enact it in this lifetime, and share it with all beings. So we often tend to shrink and think we're not good enough, or what I'm doing is not accomplished enough, or, I do this all the time in my work. Oh, this song, it's not really quite ready, or it's not good enough for XYZ reasons, for XYZ audience, when in fact, all that I need to do is work on it to the best of my ability, get it into whatever form I can that's the best of my ability, and then put it out there. I don't know who it might affect or who might be moved by that song. That's not for me to figure out. Mine is just to do my work and then to offer it up to the world. And when you think of these things as offerings, no matter what you're doing, whether you're a policeman or a writer or a teacher or a nurse or a street sweeper, it doesn't matter. Every kind of work can be thought of as an offering. And when you think of it as an offering, it becomes a very different kind of life that you're living. So breathe, live, love. I really offer these words to you as a celebration of life. And I found some poetry that I'm going to share with you today that's kind of for each of these aspects to help us celebrate. Some Mary Oliver, David White, Rumi, some of my very favorites. So I want to kind of go through these words again, take a closer look. So if you think about the word breathe, breathing is like preparation and sustenance. It's the first thing we do when we're born. It's the thing that decides whether or not we are actually going to survive, right? The baby, that's the first focus, is the baby breathing on its own. And it's the last thing that leaves us when we leave this world, that last breath, right? So it's very, very elemental. In yoga, we talk about prana. So prana is not the breath, but it is the life force that is carried in with the breath. And it's interesting because in yoga, there's this 8-limb path, the path that I study, Raja Yoga. There's an 8-limb path, and the third limb is asana, the physical practice. The fourth limb are breathing practices, and then the upper limbs are contemplative and meditation practices. So it's very interesting that the breath is in between the physical and the contemplative practices. And within it, it carries both. It has this very physical aspect, right? But it also brings us into this place of stillness that allows us to be in a more contemplative place. And the word inspiration itself means to breathe in, but it's also the taking in of spirit. So it's also very spiritual in its basic nature. It assists us with focusing our attention and preparing for meditation. But these breathing exercises also improve our ability to accrue, store, regulate, and use the energy that we bring into the body on the air that we breathe. So Rodney Yee, one of my favorite yoga instructors, says the body is the past, the mind is the future, and the breath is in the present. So that beautiful passage from Psalms, be still and know that I am God. This happens with the breath. So as we breathe, we take God, the truth, life, in to our bodies. We allow God to breathe through us, to speak through us, and to live in us. So this reminds me of Unity's first principle, that God is good and present everywhere. And if you think about God as being breath, the breath of life, it really is true. We can see God everywhere. Even the plants are breathing. We don't think of them as breathing, but they are also breathing. So we can find our home in breath each time we inhale and each time we exhale, returning again and again to this divinity that is within us. So I wanted to share this poem from David Whyte, Where Many Rivers Meet is the book that it was in, and it's called Enough. Enough. These few words are enough. If not these words, this breath. If not this breath, this sitting here. This opening to the life we have refused again and again. Until now. Until now. Isn't that a beautiful poem? So just breathing can bring us into this moment and help us realize our divinity. So once we've done that, once we've gotten this sustenance, we're ready to live. We're ready to live in the fullest possible way. In all of these moments in between, not just when we're feeling really great, not just when we're agonizing and feeling badly, but all those little moments in between. Often those are our most precious memories, not things that we planned, but things that just happened, maybe the touch of a child's hand, or seeing somebody's eyes, or somebody just saying something that moved you so much at an unexpected moment. So this is the becoming. This is that time in between, the journey of life. In the last talk that I gave here, I talked about the divine creative energy or wisdom and how that was carried in the Word, this God's intelligent cosmic vibration, and how that is within each and every one of us, and how it extends to all of creation. And I want to remind you of a couple of quotes from that talk. Meister Eckhart, this amazing mystic from the 14th century, said, "Every creature is a word of God." And then Matthew Fox, of our own century, amazing mystic as well, says, "All of creation contains the living wisdom of God, and all of it is for all of us. There is one flow, one divine word, one creative energy flowing through all things, all time, all space." And he goes on to say, our spiritual task is that we get out of the way of the truly energetic, creative Word of God long enough that we might be filled with it and go about our task of healing, celebrating, and co-creating. For God wishes to be incarnate in us. So I loved that vision statement that you had, joyfully celebrating. It's wonderful that you're doing that here at Unity Spiritual Center of Manhattan. So God is in this becoming and in this living. And this reminds me of Unity Principle number 5 that talks about the knowledge of these principles not being enough. but that we must live them. So it's fine to be up in your head to understand things, but really it's about going out there and living those things that you believe in. So for this word, I wanted to share a beautiful poem by Mary Oliver, one of my very, very favorite poets, and it's called The Journey. One day you finally knew what you had to do and began, though the voices around you kept shouting their bad advice, though the whole house began to tremble and you felt the old tug at your ankles. Mend my life, each voice cried. But you didn't stop. You knew what you had to do, though the wind pried with its stiff fingers at the very foundations, though their melancholy was terrible. It was already late enough, and a wild night, and the road full of fallen branches and stones. But little by little, as you left their voices behind, the stars began to burn through the sheets of clouds, and there was a new voice which you slowly recognized as your own, that kept you company as you strode deeper and deeper into the world, determined to do the only thing you could do, determined to save the only life you could save. So I think this is what the master wisdom teacher Jesus meant when he talked about being reborn. This kind of living, that despite whatever challenges you're facing, you pick up and you joyfully go out and celebrate the life that you have. So you do that which is yours to do. In the face of your fears and your doubts and your uncertainties, you go ahead and do it anyway, determined to live and to live joyfully. So this brings us to this next word, love. So once we've done that, we've taken in all of this energy, and we've believed in the life that we are here to live, and we've vowed to live it joyfully, celebrating, then we're ready to release our energy into the world, which is love. So you can think of this as this exhalation, this letting go of breath. And some of you may have heard this word prana that I mentioned earlier. It's relatively common. The opposite is also within yoga, apana, which means that letting go, that releasing, the giving back, the surrender. So the releasing of fear, the surrendering to a higher good, to service, to God, and to love. From this flows trust and acceptance, and then enjoyment of life's mystery, knowing all our needs in this moment will be met. So returning to Matthew Fox, who was actually quoting the wisdom scholar Gerhard von Rad, he says, what is required is a surrender of man to the glory of existence, a falling in love with what is, with existence, with life as it is. And of course, this word love, I love this passage from Matthew. When someone asked, teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law? And Jesus replied, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. And this idea is in almost every spiritual tradition. It's this complete love and devotion. This is the first and greatest commandment, and the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. And this particular passage, I often think in our culture, the second part gets ignored. The love your neighbor is talked about all the time, but it doesn't just say love your neighbor, it says love your neighbor as yourself, which implies that you already have this immense love for yourself. And that out of that comes this love for your neighbor. And then it goes on to say, all the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments. So love. Loving yourself, loving your neighbor, loving spirit, however it is that you define that. Loving all of creation. And this reminds me of unity principle number 2, that the Spirit of God lives within each individual. And I believe also in all of creation. And when you believe that, it's easy to love then, because you believe it's in yourself, and then you have all that love to offer. So here I have 2 poems to share as we close this talk. The first one is, again, another Mary Oliver poem, Wild Geese. It's one of her well-known poems. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of the rain are moving across the landscapes, over the prairies and the deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese, high in the clear, clean blue air, are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over, announcing your place in the family of things. And the second poem is called Love After Love by Derek Walcott. The time will come when, with elation, you will greet yourself arriving at your own door, in your own mirror, and each will smile at the other's welcome and say, sit here, eat. You will love again the stranger who was yourself. Give wine, give bread, give back your heart to itself, to the stranger who has loved you all your life, whom you have ignored for another who knows you by heart. Take down the love letters from the bookshelf, the photographs, the desperate notes. Peel your own image from the mirror. Sit, feast on your life. So I want to show you a little gesture that I actually do every morning. We're going to learn it here, and then we're going to use it as part of the meditation. So if you just put your hands together in Namaskarasana. Namaskar is the formal version of Namaste, which means basically the divine in me bows to the divine in you. So you have your hands together in this position, and then just open your pinky side and roll your hands around as you offer yourself to the world. Then bring the back sides of your hands together, roll them back around as you take in all life has to offer, so that you can again offer yourself to the world. So with these words, breathe, live, love, we can find beauty and grace in every moment, even within misfortune. Today is everything. This moment, this breath. Let us live it to its fullest, seeking and offering beauty everywhere we go. Breathe, live, love. And so it is.